Have you ever been working on an image for a long period of time and then you uploaded it to the web and for some reason you got an image result that looked something like this? Here is your working image in Photoshop and here is your image in the web. What's going on? Today we're going to be talking about how to fix this and what is causing the problem. Stick around. What's up, Photoshop fam? I'm Rick Navarro, and this is the Pixel Laundry Photoshop Academy. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Pixel Laundry Photoshop Academy. I'm Rick Navarro. Today we're going to be talking about RGB versus sRGB. What is it? What does it mean for your workflow? All right, guys, so this is a really common issue that I've come across several times in my career and in my business. And this is something that I imagine a lot of you guys out there are dealing with in some capacity as well. And this is the difference between color profiles. Whether you're working in e-commerce or you're working in print or you're working at a high level in fashion or you're just a mom and pop shop trying to put a little store together on Shopify, this is something that you need to pay attention to, and this will help you understand what's happening in your workflow and why your colors are not coming in as saturated as you may have shot them or as you may want them to be. And the main difference here is the difference between sRGB and Adobe RGB. Now, these are two color spaces or color profiles that are being collected either through your camera or through images that you're finding in the web. And basically what this boils down to is the amount of colors that can be displayed on a particular device. Now, that being said, I always like to think of it as your end usage is going to dictate everything. So whenever you're working in an image, you need to know what your end usage is going to be. Are you going to print this? Is it going to go up in a billboard? Is it going to go in a magazine or an advertisement? Is it only going to go in social media? So once you've established exactly what that is, then you can set up your workflow straight out of camera to match that color profile. But before we get there, let's talk a little bit about these color profiles. First off, your eyes can see about anywhere from 2 to 8 million colors. And because our technology isn't exactly there yet, you've got these color profiles. And what these color profiles are color spaces that allow these machines to interpret colors in a particularly defined space. Now, there are three main color profiles that are most widely used. They're not the only ones, but they're probably the main three that you're going to come across in photography and in photo editing. And those are your ProPhoto RGB, your Adobe RGB 1998, and your sRGB. And the easiest way to understand what these are basically think of them as large, medium, and small. S representing small, red, green, and blue. And that's what sRGB stands for. And the larger the color profile, the more saturated and the wider range of colors are going to be included inside of that color profile. Adobe RGB is going to be the medium grade color profile, and it's going to have less than ProPhoto RGB, but it's going to have more than sRGB. Now, sRGB is going to be the least saturated, and it's going to have the least color range in terms of pixels. However, it is the most widely used in terms of the web. So if you're creating images for the web, say for a website, a Shopify, a blog, any sort of content that's going to be used on a monitor, a TV, a screen of any type, you're more than likely going to want to convert your images to sRGB eventually. If you know that you're working exclusively in sRGB, you may want to modify your workflow right from capture. However, if you know that there's a chance that you may need to go to print, or that you're printing something for fine art, or any sort of print media application, you're going to want the most color information with the most color saturation as well as the most color capture as you possibly can, in which case you probably want to work from the top down or the largest file down, because if you start at a small RGB, you can never go up. You can't add pixel information, you can only take away. So a lot of times if I'm working, let's say on set, For a fashion e-commerce company, I may be capturing in Adobe RGB, but I'm exporting at sRGB because I know that all of these images may be used for print later on, but the majority of them will be primarily used for an online store. So I convert to sRGB, and if the marketing department gets back to me and says, hey, I need this particular image for a print catalog that we're doing, which is very rare these days, by the way, but it happens. If they get back to me and they need this particular image in Adobe RGB, I know that I've got all the color information that I'm going to need in order to keep that image rich and saturated and full of pixel information for the print. So again, let's recap. Easiest way to remember this is that the Pro Photo is the largest, the Adobe RGB is the medium, and the sRGB is for small, and they're mainly for different usages. Usage will dictate which color profile you may be using. You can probably set your camera in the camera's menu set, in its camera settings, which workflow you want to choose. If you know you're going to be using these images for print at some point, you may want to keep it at Adobe 98. But if you work exclusively in web or for online usage, you can start and capture your images from sRGB, which will save you file space, and it will keep your pipeline true all the way through export. If you're a professional and you're using these in a professional capacity, and you know there's a chance that you may be able to switch them around, you can set your camera to sRGB, but you'll have to remember to export once you are getting your files ready for final usage. So let's look at a couple of these things in a real life situation. This is a photo I took some time ago, and the way that it came in, if you'll notice right here, under document profile, it came under a Canon EOS 5D Mark III generic color profile. Like I said, these are not these are not the only ones. However, they are the main three. So in this particular image, it came in with a Canon color profile. If you go under edit and you go under your convert to color profile, you can see what the profile is here as well. Let's say you don't have this up, or for some reason you have it on something else, like one of these other options, you can check it under your convert to profile. What we want to do is look under our color settings. So if you go under edit and color settings, or you hit Shift, Command, and K on the Mac, it will bring up your color settings dialog. And this is going to tell you what your color settings are and how Photoshop is interpreting these colors. Now, I work a lot in web, so a lot of the times I'm going to want this to be in sRGB. Now, this workspace may seem like the workspace as in how Photoshop is displaying these images. It actually goes further back than that. If you want to go to your actual computer settings, you can look under your monitor or your display settings and look how it's interpreting color. A lot of times these will come default. I'm working on a Cintiq 22 HD, and this has a certain color profile that will shift how the monitor is interpreting these colors. If I'm working primarily in Adobe, if I'm working primarily in print, you can see, did you see that shift that happened right there between those two? That is interpreting the colors different. So I like to go to the very, very source of the image, and this is something you may want to keep in mind, because even though your workspace in Photoshop may be set to a particular color profile, the unit or the monitor that you're working with may also be on a different color profile, which are throwing your colors. So in order to kind of get the purest form of or the purest pipeline, I want to go right to the source. So I'm going to check my camera settings first and foremost, and then second, I'm going to check my actual color profile on the monitor that I'm using. Now, you can't necessarily do this, let's say, on a phone that I know of, but if I can keep my base as pure as possible, I know that once the image goes out into the world, I'm going to be dealing with untold amount of variables from phone to phone, from monitor to monitor, from lighting environment to lighting environment, which will change how the colors are viewed or perceived. So I need to keep my base as pure as possible. So my pipeline is usually adjusted right from my camera. So in my camera, like I said, I work in a little bit of both in print and in on screen. So I'm starting at Adobe 98, but my on screen is primarily sRGB because most of the images that I'm doing are for the web or for on-screen usage of some type. So I make sure that this is set to sRGB. Now my monitor should be straight. Then I'm going to go over here into my color settings, and make sure that, again, I'm not on Adobe 1998 or Pro Photo RGB, but I'm working in sRGB. You may want to set your profile up accordingly, but these are the settings that I recommend. Now, remember, this is not necessarily how you're viewing your image in Photoshop. This is how Photoshop is going to interpret the color of the image that you bring in. I will say this, though. Under this color management policy section, if there is a profile mismatch, for example, if I pull an image like a JPEG from somewhere like online and I open it and the profile mismatches, it's going to ask me if it wants to convert it. And when it converts it, it's going to convert it to this. If I want it to be left alone, let's say it's an Adobe RGB image and I want it to be left alone, it's going to ask me that here. Then I can maintain the Adobe RGB profile within it. But my default is sRGB, so it's always going to be cross-checking it across this particular setting. All these other settings, I would keep them exactly the same as they are, but you want to preserve your embedded profile. So if the image comes in with a profile already assigned to it, it's going to ask me if I want to keep it or if I want to change it. If it doesn't have a profile for some reason, like you pull this image from the internet, then it's going to ask me if it wants me to assign the sRGB, in which case, in most cases, I'm going to say yes. Okay, so in this particular one, this one actually came with one, but let's go ahead and convert it. If we go under Edit, Convert to Profile, this is the space. Let's see, I want it to go sRGB. You notice there was a color shift in the background, and then I can hit OK. And notice down here it changed over to sRGB. So now I'm starting from a strong place where I can begin to work on this edit and know that my color profile is going to be straight all the way through. And again, I'm converting this to sRGB because I know that I'm only going to use this online, let's say for my social media or for the Pixel Laundry website, so on and so forth. That's something I would want to know ahead of time before I move forward. Now, I will say, like I said, you definitely want to know what your end usage is, because if you convert this to an sRGB and try to take that sRGB and go back, you're not going to be able to. So after this conversion is done, I need to know that I'm never going to be able to convert that back to an Adobe 98 or a Pro Photo RGB. I need to be sure that I'm only going to ever use that in sRGB. However, if I stay in Adobe 98, I can go down to sRGB and I can stay at Adobe 98. I can just export it. Let me just show you that real quick. Okay, here we have an image opened up in RAW, a CR2, which I highly recommend because it gives you the most latitude in terms of color. You can see right here down at the bottom of Camera Raw, they've got this Adobe RGB 98. That means that this image was captured there, but I can also, if I click on that, I can switch it from the Adobe 98 to another color profile right here, right in Camera Raw. That's one place you can convert it. Let's just open that image as is in the Adobe 98. And here it is, the embedded profile mismatch. This document has an embedded profile, which is the Adobe 98. So I'm not going to change that. I'm going to leave it. So use the embedded profile. I'm going to hit OK. If I wanted to convert it, I can convert it here. But be aware that it's going to change how color is interpreted. But if I open it up, and let's just say I'm going to shrink this down to 1500 across, and then I'm going to export it. If I go Save for Web, or if I go File, Export, Save for Web, I've got a button right here. But if you'll notice, I want you to see what happened when it's off. You can already see that the color conversion is beginning to happen as I'm in JPEG. So this is the original here that I have not converted, and I'm exporting it as a JPEG, but this is kind of giving you a web interpretation of what that image is going to look like. So if I hit on Convert to sRGB, then all of a sudden I get this saturation that comes back. And again, if I save that without it and upload it to the web, you're going to have what happened on that first image that was in the beginning of the video. All right, so if I convert that to sRGB and hit save, now I'm going to have consistent color all the way through the upload, and then I'll be fine. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today. I hope that makes RGB and sRGB a little less complicated. Easiest way to remember it is that S stands for small, and anything that is on screen or web related needs to be an sRGB. If you are printing, you can use Adobe 98 or ProPhoto RGB, and that will keep your colors consistent from your workflow all the way through final export. Hope that helps you out. If it did, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, tell somebody, pass it along. And until next time, keep it real, Photoshop fam. Create every day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.